York, Eric T. Schneiderman. And now, to begin our program, we are going to ask Dr. Dennis Morey to give us welcoming remarks, who is the president of this wonderful college, Marist College. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name's Dennis Murray, and for the last 35 years, I've had the honor of serving as president here at Marist College, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you and the Attorney General, not only to Marist College, but to our beautiful and historic Hudson River Valley. The role of Attorney General in New York State has a long and storied history. The office has actually been in existence in some form since 1626, when it was under the Dutch colonial form of government. And New York's state attorney generals have gone on to become presidents of the United States, U.S. senators, and many governors of New York. So you can certainly see it's an important position. We're honored to welcome our Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, not only to Marist College, but to the greater Hudson River Valley region. Attorney General, welcome. So it's my pleasure now to introduce to you our county executive, to welcome you to the beautiful county of Dutchess. And our county executive has been a long-serving community leader. He was first elected at the age of 18 when he joined the village board in Tivoli. The next year he became the mayor and was the youngest mayor in the nation during that period. He's also served terms in our Dutchess County Legislature and the New York State Assembly. In 2011, he was elected to lead Dutchess County, taking over as the executive officer of our county, and again, the youngest executive in the history of Dutchess County. So we're grateful for the leadership he's provided, and we thank him for being here this evening. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our county executive, Mark Molinaro. Mark.
I admittedly enjoy those introductions when they start with "you were the youngest this" or "the youngest that." It means that I have had a long history of being young. I want to be a bit more parochial than Dennis and welcome you all to Dutchess County. And to Dennis Murray and the folks here at Marist College, welcome, first thank you, but welcome to what is perhaps among the most beautiful campuses in the country. Marist has been a leader academically, athletically, economically, and we are grateful for the partnership that we have had. Mr. Attorney General, welcome to Dutchess. Welcome back. The Attorney General and I served together briefly. I briefly, he longer, in the New York State Legislature. He served in the New York State Senate, I in the New York State Assembly. And if you know anything about the New York State Senate, you know that most assemblymen don't want to go there. But the Attorney General has been a leader on a number of issues, and we here in Dutchess County are exceptionally grateful for your partnership, in particular, and your help with our combat and response to heroin abuse, opiates, addiction, and certainly home foreclosures. The Attorney General has been on the forefront of those issues. I think it is easy enough to suggest that in a democracy, government doesn't often work well without open and honest dialogue. And I believe this is the 8th and final town hall meeting that the Attorney General is hosting. We're happy that it's here in Dutchess County and that all of you have found time to join in an important conversation. He is joined by a number of members of his staff, and we are grateful to them. I'm going to take one liberty and extend our appreciation, Mr. Attorney General, to your folks here in Poughkeepsie, Vince Bradley, Nick Guerin, Jahoon Kim, and the incomparable Mark Hoops, all of whom have been great partners with us on a number of issues. Mr. Attorney General, before I introduce the next speaker and the senator, I want to remind you and extend to all of you my apologies. I was planning to be here for the entire time the first time this was scheduled, but tonight I have a birthday dinner with a member of my family, and I might need an attorney if I don't show up for that. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce a public servant and advocate here in Dutchess County, an individual who has worked very, very hard on behalf of his constituents and on behalf of the people of the state of New York. I know this firsthand because he has been to every senior citizen picnic we've had in Dutchess County, and he's been telling people that. I believe him. Ladies and gentlemen, my New York State and your New York State Senator, Terry Gipson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is really an honor to be here tonight, and we are so privileged and honored to have the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, here with us tonight. You know, when you're a state senator, especially when you are newly elected as I am, you get a lot of calls from a lot of constituents that need a lot of help, and you try to help them. But oftentimes you need allies and resources beyond what you're able to offer. And many times during my term, we have reached out to the Attorney General's office, and I have been so impressed by both the Attorney General's commitment as well as his staff's commitment to making sure that everyone plays by the same rules, and even more importantly, making sure that those rules are enforced equally for everyone. You know, he also received national recognition for his fight for a strong national mortgage settlement, holding banks accountable and making sure that those people who were at risk of losing their homes received the protection and the help that they needed. And the prescription drug and heroin epidemic that our communities are so challenged with right now, he has really been at the forefront of that fight. And his I Stop legislation has done an amazing job of drastically reducing the accessibility of prescription drugs for our youth. It's been a real pleasure to work with him and his staff. I look forward to doing it again. I know that tonight they have a very informative presentation for you, and so it is my privilege to introduce our New York State Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to be back in Poughkeepsie, and it has been a real pleasure to get to spend some time at this amazing institution. And I have to thank President Murray for his hospitality here, and also just for those of you who have not actually taken the time to tour around and see what they're doing here. This is one of the most remarkable educational institutions in the country, and does things no one else does, and they should be very proud of it as an anchor of this community and an anchor of this county, and I thank you for having me here today. I also want to thank Terry for that kind introduction and for his great work. It's hard to explain how tough it is to be in the New York State Senate. I know that your Mark, your great county executive, mentioned it, but it's just a very tough place to do business, and it's a very tough place to get things done. And you have a senator who understands how to get things done as well as anyone I've seen work there. I served there for a number of years and seen people come and go. But Terry is a great representative, and I thank you for your great service and your partnership. And I have to say, I'm very pleased by this turnout. This is not our final forum. This is the first round of our forums. We start up again in the fall, but we have been trying to go around the state. We're meeting with local officials, and the most important part of today is not me speaking to you. It is the fact that we've got our key division heads and bureau chiefs who have been here meeting with advocates and activists and others during the course of the day, because those connections are really how we work together to make our state a better place. We also are joined by some other extraordinary public servants, in addition to those I've mentioned, Assembly members Dee Dee Barrett and Frank Skartenos. Thank you for being here. Mayors Randy Casal and Matt Alexander, thank you for being here. And I know we have some supervisors, county legislators, and others here with us. This is actually an extraordinary turnout, and I thank you for being here, and I thank you all for electing such a fine group of effective public servants. You are well represented here, and I'm the Attorney General for the whole state. I have 30 bureaus and 13 offices around the state. This is a really remarkable part of our state, and the challenges you face here are challenges that are faced everywhere. The response here is very impressive, and we are proud of the fact that we've worked and partnered with your local officials and done a lot of good work together, and look forward to just expanding and building on that work in the years ahead. So we're joined tonight by, in addition to Vince Bradley, who is the head of my office in Poughkeepsie. Is Hoops here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just want to make sure. And some of our other colleagues from our office, and also some of our great interns who've been helping put this together tonight. I thank all of you. But the point of tonight is for you to meet the people who are here. The Executive Deputy Attorney General, who runs all of our regional offices around the state, Marty Mack, the Bureau Chief of our Civil Rights Bureau, Kristen Clark, the Healthcare Bureau Chief, Lisa Landau, and Terry Gerstein, who heads our Labor Bureau, and Lem Sralovic, the head of our great Environmental Protection Bureau, and you're going to be hearing from all of them. But I just want to start us off by making a few comments, and the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is to convey to you my firm belief that none of us gets anything done alone. Nothing significant gets done alone. Politicians who tell you, I did this and I did that. In some cases, there is actual delusion going on, and in some cases, it's just a matter of a lack of understanding or a lack of honesty about the fact that significant changes, improvements in our society require coalition, they require collaboration, they require the ability to work with people that you may not agree with on everything, but you can figure out ways to do this. And I never forget the fact that I certainly didn't get here on my own, and everything we accomplished that's significant, I'm going to talk to you about a few of the things that I'm very proud of, has been done through collaboration. And we often say that the United States is not just a country. The United States is a project. And each of us is called to participate in that project. And the idea for me, is that every generation is challenged to leave our country a little more equitable, a little more just, a little better than we found it. And our generation now is challenged in a lot of different ways. And we are working hard to make New York State, which I represent, safer and stronger and more just than it has ever been. And I see tremendous opportunity here. I am in the justice business. In fact, the building where my lawyers work in Albany is called the Justice Building. So our commitment to you is that we work every day to expand the quintessential American idea of equal justice under law. That is our guiding principle. The idea is something that defines what we do. And when we talk about equal justice, we break that down into three parts. Everyone deserves a fair shot. Everyone has to pay their fair share, and there has to be one set of rules for everyone. You now know the principles that underlie all of the work we do in our office. We are here to continue the great American tradition of moving forward. And when the country was founded, the aspiration was great. When Thomas Jefferson wrote that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But we know that the facts on the ground contradicted that statement. So, my conservative colleagues get upset if I say, well, people say, oh, that was just not true when Jefferson wrote it. I think that's looking at it the wrong way. This was an aspiration. And we know that women weren't even in the sentence. And it was in the great New York town of Seneca Falls at a conference of women 166 years ago this weekend that they announce that all men and women are created equal. And slavery was widespread when Jefferson wrote those words. Jews and other non-Christians in many places couldn't own property, couldn't vote. A lot of struggles went into the next couple of hundred years to make those words ever more true. But through the abolition movement, the women's suffrage movement, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, we have always moved forward as a country, and we've always done it, whether consciously or not, following that essential American mission. So we aspire in our office to do justice, but we also aspire to do things no one has ever done before. We have two essential functions. We defend the state of New York and defend our laws and defend the actions of the state. We also have affirmative litigation bureaus, which are represented here tonight, and in those bureaus we really play the role of the people's lawyer. We are the lawyers for the people of the state of New York, and I'm very proud of being a lawyer. I love the American legal tradition. I am the first attorney general in modern history to actually spend more of my time practicing law than in some other government work before becoming attorney general. So I understand the private sector well. I understand the state government well, having served in the state senate. But we are taking now all of our skills and combining them, and I want to just give you a few examples of things we have done, and my colleagues are going to talk to you about more issues. But Terry mentioned one or two of them. We have done something that no one else has done in the country in the area of prescription drug abuse. And I was in Washington yesterday, actually, and I think that this is something you'll see modeled around the country. When I took office, prescription drug abuse and the flood of prescription drugs in our schools, everywhere, was out of control, and no one seemed to know what to do about it. The nationwide overdose deaths from prescription drugs more than tripled from 2000 to 2008. Extraordinary acceleration of the abuse of these drugs, and the prescription opioids are they're really heroin pills. I mean, it's the same chemical reaction. So we set about to do something no one else had ever done. I have an organized crime task force, and I went to the National Attorney General's Association meeting. They're saying no one knows what to do about this. You can't arrest your way out of this kind of a drug epidemic. So we figured out these drugs aren't getting out there because people are hijacking trucks coming from the pharmaceutical labs. They're getting out there because of doctors writing prescriptions and pharmacists filling prescriptions. So my brilliant staff, came up with the idea that if we just set up an internet tracking system, which all the doctors and pharmacies have to have now already because of insurance, we now have set up a real-time system in New York, only state that has it. We designed it, we organized a campaign of people to support it, and it passed in the legislature and was signed into law. Every doctor sees how many prescriptions I've got for prescription opioids. Every pharmacist sees them when filling in and enters in. So you can't get the same prescription from two doctors for these pain medications anymore in the state of New York. This program has been in effect, after it was in effect for 8 months, it started last summer. The New York State Department of Health reported that doctor shopping, that means people who had the same prescription for prescription opioids from two doctors, had been cut by 75% in 8 months. So that's being tough on crime, but being smart on crime, and understanding all of the complexities of addiction and drug abuse. And I have to say that we're very proud of having set up that system, and I do look forward to it being emulated in states around the country. We've also taken on other situations, and as I was discussing with President Murray, we're in a period of time where the federal government is not getting a lot of things done that we would like it to get done. There's a lot of gridlock in Washington. It's very hard for them to do even things that are pretty common sense. So we've been stepping in on, for example, the prescription drug database should have been set up nationally. I think it will be eventually, but we stepped in. Other areas where we've come in, and this also relates to drug abuse, is we realized that we weren't getting funding for basic equipment for our law enforcement officers. We've always collaborated in the Attorney General's office with the police departments around the state, but we really haven't taken as proactive a view saying, what do our colleagues in law enforcement need? And we realized that the federal government used to have a program to reimburse police departments for bulletproof vests, but the funding had been cut. So we're now using money we get from forfeitures from gangs, and we are now reimbursing all of our police departments who want to buy bulletproof vests in the state of New York. We're also taking, thank you. We're also providing police departments with something called naloxone, which is a drug that literally stops you from dying of a heroin or opioid overdose. It intercepts the opioids that interact with your brain and cause you to stop breathing, which is how you die. It used to be only available intravenously, and cops in the field couldn't really deal with that. They've now, a few years ago, invented a way to put it in like a nasal inhaler. And we had a pilot program in Suffolk County. Over 180 people's lives were saved in the pilot program. And all over the state of New York now, police departments have that, officers on the beat have that. We are saving lives all over the state by supplying them with this critical drug. It takes you within minutes out of the overdose. You can get into treatment, and it's been extraordinarily successful. And I am happy to report that pretty much everyone whose life has been saved has gotten immediately into treatment. I think it is, if that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is, but they are actually following through on it. So those are a couple of examples of things we've done. Another area of crime that was totally baffling law enforcement when I took office was smartphone theft. And I don't know if you all know this, but 3 million people were the victims of smartphone theft in 2013. There were hundreds of thousands of assaults. There were dozens of murders of people to get smartphones because they're very easy to steal. They're very easy to clean. You can clean all the data off of it and have essentially a new phone. And they're very easy to resell. There's fencing markets available all around the world. They ship a lot of them overseas where they're actually worth more. In California, San Francisco, they have automated fencing machines. I've never heard of this, but you drop in a phone, it reads the barcodes and spits out cash. So a questionable technological innovation, but reflective of the size and sophistication of this network. So the San Francisco district attorney was trying to do something about this, because I guess San Francisco is a place where everyone walks around all the time on their iPhone, because apparently more than 50% of the crime there involved this. And I think it's very hard to fight against Google and Apple and Microsoft if you were in San Francisco. So he was having a hard time getting things done. So we said, that's fine. You fly over here. They'll show up if we tell them to show up. So we got the manufacturers into the room. We brought in people down in New York City, brought in people from the NYPD to read them the statistics that crime was down in every category, but a 40% increase in smartphone thefts and assaults related to them. We had the parents of a kid who died, was shot for her smartphone. So we weren't going to fool around with these guys. And we told them that if they didn't install kill switches so you can cancel the phone like a credit card, which immediately takes away the incentive for any thief, right? Very simple. That if they didn't do that, we were going to organize a coalition nationally to force them to do it. They gave us a lot of stuff. Oh, it's about customer choice. We don't know if people want to have that on. And then we learned that they were making $30 billion a year replacing stolen smartphones. So we figured, well, so much for the customer choice rhetoric. We think we know what's going on here. So the DA in San Francisco and I then started, and we organized a coalition of hundreds of district attorneys, attorneys general, mayors, police chiefs around the country, and finally got, last fall, Apple to install an activation lock, which it's not perfect because it's an opt-in, not an opt-out, but more than 70% of the iPhone users were opted in, and we got statistics a month or so ago that showed that because of that, the thefts of Apple phones were going down, while the thefts of other phones were going up, because the fences were saying to the thieves, stop bringing me the iPhones. Half of them have been shut off. And at that point, everyone else gave up. And all the other companies said, okay, we give up. We're all installing these switches. This is how to end a crime wave, by being smart and by organizing and by doing things that no one else has ever tried before. These are people in my office come up with this stuff all the time. Finally, Terry mentioned the issue of foreclosures, and I am tremendously proud of the fact that our office was alone in the United States of America after I got elected in being the one state that refused to go along with what, in my view, was a really shameful effort to settle all the claims against the banks, who, you may recall, in 2008, the American economy was blown up because people had issued bad mortgages and packaged them into bad mortgage-backed securities and made a fortune selling them. And then when the crash hit, the wealth of the American middle class was wiped out because it was in the equity of our homes. That's where a lot of people had their money. I was not inclined to let these guys get away with it without an investigation and some accountability. There was a settlement on the table when I took office that would have really essentially let them go for a very small amount of money. So we held out, and one by one, other AGs started saying, well, maybe he's right. Maybe this is right. And eventually, the federal government changed their mind and decided that we should do a thorough investigation. I know some people are saying, well, that shouldn't have been so hard to convince them of, but, you know, things are strange in Washington right now. And the President of the United States, a year after I'd taken office, in the State of the Union address, announced that we're creating an unprecedented state and local task force that I was going to co-chair, and that we were going to investigate the conduct that blew up the American economy. Our first two cases have resulted in the largest settlements in the history of the United States from two banks, JP Morgan Chase and Citi. We've closed down $20 billion worth of money back to states and relief for homeowners. We have in New York set up what we call our homeowner protection program. We are funding more than 90 legal services and housing counseling agencies. So to the extent any banks make available loan modifications, which they are doing, New Yorkers are never going to miss out because they don't have a lawyer or a housing counselor. We have them here in Dutchess County, and you go on our website, you can find wherever the network of providers are in your part of the state. We have helped tens of thousands of families already, and there's only two banks. We've got more banks to go, and we're going to just continue. And we're just going to continue to hold them accountable and to work as hard as we possibly can to make sure that the money that they pay actually goes to help the communities that were hurt. And we have now moved beyond helping individual homeowners because we realize that some folks already lost their homes, but they're in these communities that are struggling. We're now funding what are called land banks. And they don't have one here yet in Poughkeepsie, but our colleagues in the state legislature passed a bill at the end of the session to expand the number of land banks in the state. Land banks give local governments the ability, and we provide the money. Money comes from the banks. It goes through us to the land banks to buy any abandoned property. Because if you're on a street with two abandoned houses, it's bad for crime. Property values go down. It depresses the whole community. Now local governments can buy them up and rehabilitate them. Use them for low-income housing. In some places, unfortunately, they just need to tear them down. In Buffalo, they're created parks because there are fewer people in Buffalo than there used to be, and these properties were just a blight on the neighborhood. So we are trying to be as creative and aggressive as we can, and my bureau chiefs are going to talk to you about a couple of the areas that are most essential, in my view, to your well-being and the well-being of the people in this community. But I assure you that everyone you're going to hear tonight and everyone in my office every day of the year views what we're doing as a part of a broader struggle. We are dedicated to being as creative as we can be and being as dogged as we can be. We don't give up easily. Coming up with ways to solve problems so that New York State is safer, New York State is more equitable, people of the state of New York are not getting scammed, and that we're just moving ahead together. And it's always been through coalitions, whether it was the coalition that enabled us to turn the White House around on the banks, whether it was the coalition that forced the smartphone companies to install skill switches, the coalition that enabled us over the objections of the pharmaceutical industry to pass the iStop program. We work with you. So work with us. And there are folks here who I know have worked with us on civil rights issues, on environmental protection issues, and others. We view ourselves as your partners. We view ourselves as your lawyers, but good lawyers need good clients. And we need you to speak up. We love whistleblowers, and we love people who bring us ideas that, maybe no one else has tried before, but they might just work. Most of our great leads come from people in the communities. Work with us, talk to us. You're going to now meet some folks who are going to tell you more detail about some of those critical areas, not just for our office, but to all of you in your day-to-day lives. I thank you for being here tonight, and now you're going to meet the folks who really make it happen. I don't take for granted for one day being your Attorney General. I love the work. and I'm going to keep doing it as long as you allow me to do it. And now I want to introduce the incredible staff that actually makes people's lives better every day. And emceeing the program is going to be our Poughkeepsie office chief, Vince Bradley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. As you heard, my name is Vince Bradley. I'm the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Poughkeepsie office. And before I get started, I wanted to stress something that the Attorney General touched on. We have a relatively small office here in Poughkeepsie, but we're very active. And one of the most important thing that we can get from the public is to hear what's going on out in the community. If you have a problem, to call our office, to reach out to us. I can tell you I talk to dozens of consumers every week. And I just want to encourage anyone, if they have an issue, to contact our office. And if we don't know how to deal with your problem, we're going to find out how to do it or to direct you in the proper direction where your problem could be solved. So I do want to stress that before I get started. Tonight you're going to hear about some of the great work done by the bureaus represented here. And the Attorney General mentioned Marty Mack, who is actually my supervisor. Marty runs all of the regional offices throughout the state. He's the Executive Deputy Attorney General of regional offices. Next to Marty is Kristen Clark, who's the Chief of the Civil Rights Bureau in the Attorney General's office. Next to Kristen is the Attorney General, I'm sorry. And to the left of the Attorney General is Lisa Landau, who is the Bureau Chief for the Healthcare Bureau. And to her left is Terry Gerstein, who is the Chief of the Labor Bureau. And to Terry's left is Lemuel Shirolovic. I call him Lem. He is the Chief of the Environmental Bureau for the Attorney General's office. Each of these bureaus have been active in this region. You're going to hear about some of the important work they do throughout the state. But I can tell you from my experience that they've all been very active in this region, and I've worked with each one of them over the course of my time here. Now at this time, I'd like to introduce Marty Mack, the Executive Attorney General of Regional Offices. As I mentioned, he supervises not only my office, but all of the regional offices across the state. And today he's going to talk about some of the statewide efforts that the regional offices have made to combat consumer fraud issues.
Thank you, Vince. We're all consumers, and most of us spend most of our dollars in the consumer marketplace. So this is an item of key priority to the Attorney General, because given the scarce dollars in our pockets at times, it's important that those dollars get spent wisely. And so there's a competition going on in the marketplace between the information provided by retail stores at times or other sellers of goods and services and the consumer. The consumer has a right to honest and fair dealing and to be informed honestly about what is being sold in the store, the quality of the good in the store, the pricing in the store. Let me give you one example of where this conflict reaches our attention. There are two stores in the state that are national chains, Michael's and Hobby Lobby. And they have become known for having many sales. Well, the problem is that it's okay to have a sale. It's okay to charge what you want. But if you charge the same price every day of the year, don't call it a sale. And what we learned with Hobby Lobby and Michael's is that that's what they did. Because an endless sale is no sale at all. And they do this because they know that consumers respond to language in the ads. Words matter. If something is called a sale, that brings in more customers. It leads to more sales. So we reached an agreement with both Hobby Lobby and Michael's wherein we defined what a sale is. We looked at the numbers of how often a price is charged at a regular price and when there's a sale. And they have to stay within these guidelines. So both of them paid a very hefty fine, signed an agreement where we were very specific in what's a sale and what's not, and also to pay back to the communities in some fashion, because it's hard to identify restitution for the 100 or 1,000 of people who go in and out of a store and spend $15. They provided gift cards to local school districts who buy a lot of crafts just to allow them a form of public restitution so that there was some additional penalty for Michael's and Hobby Lobby. So as important as consumer protection is, And as much emphasis as the Attorney General gives it, it's always difficult, it's always challenging, because merchants at times, stray from the truth, stray from fair dealing. Most of the time do a great job. But it's our job and the Attorney General's responsibility to protect the consumer in that marketplace. And we do depend, as everyone has been saying, on you to be the source of information. When you feel you're ripped off or treated unfairly, you should let us know so that we can investigate it. We have the authority to conduct these investigations, and generally they're a product of your efforts in helping us. But thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I now would like to introduce Kristen Clark. Kristen, as I mentioned, is the Bureau Chief of the Civil Rights Bureau. Prior to joining the Attorney General's office, Kristen served as the co-director of the Political Participation Group at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, where she managed the activities of the organization's legal program in the areas of voting rights and election law. She also previously served as trial attorney in the U.S. Department of Justice, where she handled a range of issues, including police misconduct, hate crimes, and human trafficking cases. Kristen Clark.
Good evening. The Civil Rights Bureau is the part of the office that is focused on combating discrimination, promoting equality, and advancing the cause of the civil rights of all New Yorkers. 50 years ago this month, former President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and today we continue to use the Civil Rights Act and other laws like it to do our work. I want to talk briefly about some of what we've been up to in the Bureau. We have been working hard to combat employment discrimination and ensure that everyone has equal access to employment opportunities. We have gone after employers, for example, that have erected barriers for persons with criminal convictions, automatically disqualifying job candidates no matter how old a conviction they may have on their record. We're working to ensure that everybody gets a fair shot. We know that once you pay your debt to society, you deserve a fair chance. We're also working to fight for LGBT justice, and we've done work with the National Football League, the Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer to help ensure that no recruit or player faces discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation. And this work is not only having an impact here in New York, but all across the country. We're also fighting to ensure access to democracy. We've led statewide election hotlines during every statewide election over the last 2 years. And we're fighting to ensure equal access to the ballot box, even right here in Dutchess County. We're working with the Dutchess County Board of Elections to ensure that all materials, everything from the voter registration form up through the ballot that's offered on Election Day, is made available bilingually. Working to ensure that the board hires bilingual poll workers in those areas that have significant numbers of limited English proficient voters. We're working to promote disability access to ensure that all public accommodations, retail sites, theaters, bus companies are accessible to people with disabilities. We recently secured agreements with 2 major retailers that will ensure that the shops at South Hall and 44 Plaza right here in Poughkeepsie are accessible to all consumers with disabilities. We're also working to confront the collateral consequences of the foreclosure crisis and the impact that the crisis is having on minority communities. We're fighting to ensure that language does not stand as a barrier for those seeking to exercise important rights or access important public services provided by police departments. We have agreements with a number of police departments around the state, including the Middletown Police Department, which is not too far from here, that ensures that they're working to recruit bilingual officers and that they have a way of serving crime victims who may not speak English. And we're also fighting immigration fraud. We know that there is a tremendous amount of fraud that's predicated upon vulnerable immigrant communities, whether it's immigration services or employment agencies that defraud vulnerable immigrant communities. We're committed to fighting fraud in any form. This year marks the 20th anniversary of a really great law that ensures that mothers have the right to breastfeed in public accommodations in our state. And we're still doing work to enforce this law today. Just last week, we announced an agreement with Barnes & Noble that will ensure that all mothers have the right to breastfeed their babies in Barnes & Noble stores. And finally, there's no shortage of incredibly important civil rights cases that have gone before the Supreme Court. And in all of these cases, the Attorney General has been playing a leadership role, filing multi-state briefs, arguing in defense of the Voting Rights Act, arguing in defense of diversity in the admissions process for colleges and universities, fighting for marriage equality. And last week, when the Supreme Court issued a ruling striking down a law in Massachusetts which set up a buffer zone outside of reproductive health clinics, we responded when we saw that ruling caused confusion here in our state. We issued guidance to police departments all around New York, letting them know that the Supreme Court's ruling was limited to the state of Massachusetts, and letting them know that women continue to have access to reproductive health clinics in New York, and that buffer zones that exist in our state still stand. So in closing, we know that we've made great progress, but we still have a tremendous amount of work to do, and we look forward to working in partnership with you to promote civil rights across New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I'd now like to introduce Lisa Landau. Lisa currently serves as chief of the Healthcare Bureau at the New York State Attorney General's office, where her bureau enforces healthcare law, including consumer protection law, to protect New Yorkers as they confront the challenges of the healthcare system. Prior to rejoining the Attorney General's office in 2011, Lisa was executive director of New York City's Nurse Family Partnership, a nationally recognized evidence-based anti-poverty program. Lisa also previously served in the New York Attorney General's office from 1999 until 2006. Serving as director of the Reproductive Rights Unit, and prior to that as an assistant attorney general in the Civil Rights Bureau, working on an array of civil rights cases, including sex discrimination, police misconduct, and mortgage lending fraud. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We like to think that the Healthcare Bureau's actions and initiatives bring us closer to leveling the playing field for citizens in New York State and bring the public that much closer to health equity. Our Healthcare Bureau investigates and brings enforcement actions against actors in the health arena, including health plans, drug companies, healthcare lenders, and health-related businesses that engage in fraudulent, misleading, deceptive, or illegal practices. We have a group of lawyers who work on investigations and enforcement actions, and we have a terrific group of advocates who staff a helpline that resolve individual complaints. And in 2013 alone, our helpline fielded almost 6,000 calls and resolved about 3,300 individual complaints, which resulted in about $4 million going back into the pockets of New Yorkers across the state. So we encourage you to use this helpline. It's a helpline for everyone in the state with issues that concern them about their health care. I'd like to quickly mention 3 of the Healthcare Bureau's current areas of concern. One is the public health arena, and most prominently in the past year, very much related to our Attorney General's efforts on the iStop initiative, is our efforts to enforce the mental health parity laws. Just last week, we announced a major settlement with a very large health plan, Emblem Health, a major plan in New York City area, having about $3.5 million. And our focus has really been in enforcing both federal and state parity laws that require the health plans not to discriminate against members with behavioral health needs and to cover treatment to which they're entitled. We've been finding that some plans are blatantly excluding certain kinds of behavioral health coverage, like residential treatment for eating disorders, and that certain plans are second-guessing medical doctors in the mental health realm more than in the medical surgical realm, and particularly where claims relates to substance abuse treatments. And so with our settlements with respect to Emblem and MVP in March, we settled with that health plan having about 500,000 members, many of whom live in this particular area, in the Poughkeepsie area. These plans have now agreed to cover residential treatment in the future and to review past claims to reimburse consumers for what they paid out of pocket and to equalize copays for behavioral health providers and not make consumers pay the specialist copay. In addition, there's going to be an independent review using the right criteria, the appropriate criteria, for, in the case of Emblem, over $30 million worth of claims are going to be reviewed. So we've also been active in looking at tanning salons, in looking at the kinds of health representations they make. We know that this is an industry that actually helps to raise the cancer rates and has actually been classified by the World Health Organization as a carcinogenic service, much like tobacco. And so these are businesses that are using health claims that tanning makes you healthier to really lure young people to do indoor tanning. So we've been working to eliminate those kinds of representations from the industry's representations to the public. And with respect to women's health, in May we announced an agreement with a major health plan, Empire Blue Cross, to make sure that women who are diagnosed with breast cancer and require a mastectomy are able to get reconstruction surgery on an in-network basis if there's no in-network plastic surgeon at the hospital where the in-network mastectomy surgeon practices. So that's a little bit of a technical realm, but those of you who maybe have family members or know people that have been diagnosed with breast cancer know the challenges that women face in getting the surgery and the reconstruction to happen in the same surgical proceeding, and covered by their health plan. So we think that's a really important step forward for women's health. And I want to mention briefly, medical debt is really plaguing many New Yorkers with increasing health costs. And while the Affordable Care Act has certainly been very successful in New York, and we've gotten lots more people covered, there are high deductibles. There are always procedures that fall out of what's covered by health plans, including dental practice and dental care. So we entered into an agreement last year with GE for really stopping some very bad practices with respect to a medical credit card called Care Credit. And in that instance, dentists were essentially the brokers for GE and selling lots of services to patients, upselling services, and not telling patients that after a promotional period that there was a 27% interest rate that would go into effect from the date of service. So we entered into an agreement that essentially changed practices, had a cooling off period, much more disclosure, and allowed for people to get money back in an appeals process. And related to that, we've been looking very carefully at lenders online, medical lenders online. There are many, many of them. And just this past April, we entered into a first agreement with a lender and a broker that were essentially foisting internet loans on New Yorkers to the tune of 25 to 55% interest rates. And so people are very vulnerable and don't know that perhaps these are rates that really are illegal. And so we've entered into that settlement, and now we're looking at many, many other medical lenders online to make sure that people in New York are not going to get the wool pulled over their eyes. And finally, we really are looking, I think you see the theme about disclosure and our concern with people really knowing what they're getting into and making businesses really step up to the plate. And so medical care costs and insurance coverage are certainly an issue. We can't control prices, but we can help to ensure that health plan disclosures are clear so that consumers understand their policies and understand what their policies reimburse and what they don't, so that consumers have the information that they need to make informed choices. So the bottom line is that we're watching out for consumers. I think you hear that theme loud and clear. Whether it's fraudulent business practice or hiding the ball in some way, we're here to level the playing field to achieve equity and justice on behalf of New Yorkers across the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to remind everyone that in the program there is a comment card, and we will be taking questions after the speakers are finished. We're not going to be able to answer everybody's question tonight, but what I will tell you is that if you hand in your question and there's a way we can contact you, the appropriate person in our office will either email you or give you a phone call, and you will have an answer to your question. At this time, I'd like to introduce the AG's Labor Bureau Chief, Terry Gerstein. Prior to becoming the Bureau Chief, Terry was the Deputy Commissioner of Labor for the state of New York. Please welcome Terry Gerstein.
Thank you. Thank you. In the Labor Bureau, we enforce the law to protect workers' most basic rights: the right to be paid for your work, the right to get minimum wage, to get overtime when you work over 40 hours in a week, and the right not to be retaliated against if you report violations of the law. We focus on certain industries, typically low-wage industries, with high rates of violations. And we focus on particular industries to try to have a broader impact and have deterrence. In recent years, we have resolved cases involving a wide range of employers, including fast food restaurants, car washes, construction contractors, moving companies, nail salons, supermarkets, and others. In the Labor Bureau, we bring cases both civilly, as civil lawsuits and civil investigations, as well as criminally prosecuting employers. And we reserve that criminal prosecution power for some of the worst violators. For example, repeat violators, like a cleaning contractor at a movie theater that was investigated by the U.S. Department of Labor, had to pay underpayments, and then continued the same practices. Another example of a criminal case would be a situation where an employer committed some kind of fraud. A government contractor doing prevailing wage public work, building a public building, who created paperwork showing proper payment of the prevailing wage required by law, but then instead of paying the actual amount of money on the paperwork, paid workers a much lower rate. Another example of a type of case we would do criminally is when workers just don't get paid at all for work that they've performed, such as two cases we've handled involving home health aides who started working for this happened with two different agencies. The workers worked for a month, 2 months, and didn't get paid, continued working because of their devotion to the patients, and the employer promised them, I'll pay you, and ultimately we ended up criminally prosecuting. One of those cases was resolved through a guilty plea, the other is ongoing. Some recent cases that we've announced in the past few months give a good sense of the flavor of our work. We had a nearly $4 million settlement with a large car wash chain in New York City that was committing a variety of violations, including underpaying workers, not paying overtime. In some locations, workers' tips were being taken by management. And in addition, a number of the workers, the employer was not paying unemployment insurance taxes or procuring workers' compensation insurance for these workers. And so we got a settlement of about $3.9 million, of which over $2 million is restitution for the workers. The rest are unpaid unemployment taxes and penalties. We had several other car wash cases involving employers who paid as little as $4 an hour to car wash workers. We've had several settlements we announced involving fast food employers, including settlements with 7 different Domino's pizza franchisees located throughout the state. And together, those 7 franchisees run a total of 26 restaurants throughout the state. And this is, these restaurants were ranging from Erie County to the Hudson Valley to New York City, all the way to Long Island and also Schenectady. So it really was a statewide type of problem. The violations varied store by store, but they included non-payment of overtime to workers. In some instances, workers were paid a lower tipped rate, even though they were doing a lot of untipped work in the kitchen. And workers weren't necessarily fully compensated for their vehicle costs of delivering the pizzas. We've also recently settled a couple of cases involving McDonald's franchisees. One franchisee who didn't provide workers with money to launder their uniforms because they had to wear the uniforms every day, and the law requires money for laundering them. And another McDonald's franchisee in Rochester, where an employee who discovered a gas leak and ultimately reported it to 911. The gas leak was confirmed by the fire and police department, and they shut down the store for the night, and the worker was ultimately fired for this act that really he should have been praised for. And so we ended up getting that worker a year and a half of, he did not want to go back to that workplace, but we obtained, not surprisingly. So he did not want to be reinstated. We got what is called front pay in lieu of reinstatement, which is basically a year and a half of the salary that he would have gotten had he continued working there. So those are some examples of cases. We've also been looking at the payment of wages by payroll cards. An increasing trend is that some employers are paying workers not necessarily by check or direct deposit, but with a sort of the equivalent of a prepaid debit card. And this can bring certain advantages environmentally or in instances of disaster or for unbanked workers who would otherwise be paying check cashing fees. But at the same time, often the disclosures prior to workers signing up for these cards are insufficient, and workers often end up incurring significant fees in just trying to access their wages. So we sent letters to a number of major national employers asking about their payroll card programs. We compiled and analyzed the information provided and issued a report last month summarizing what we see as some of the primary issues and concerns about payroll cards. In the course of the last 3 years, we've, through our enforcement work, been able to obtain a significant amount of money in underpayments for workers, $16 million for over 10,000 workers, as well as over $2 million in penalties. So this money is very important, but also the deterrent and ripple effect on other workplaces and other workers and empowering workers to stand up for their rights is equally important as well. As with everyone else here, I look forward to hearing from all of you about what's happening on the ground here, and together, hopefully, we can bring about more just workplaces in New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. At this time, staff members are going to be going up and down the stairs collecting the comment cards, so if anyone is going to pass them in, please do so now. Now I'd like to welcome the AG's Environmental Bureau Chief, Lemuel Sherlovic. Previously, Lem served in the Bureau as a Section Chief of Affirmative and Enforcement Litigation, where he led a team of lawyers and scientists enforcing state and federal environmental laws, ranging from limits on engine idling by diesel trucks and buses to laws protecting our wetlands and waters. Please welcome Lem.
Good evening. Thank you, Vince. The guiding principle of Attorney General Schneiderman's Environmental Protection Bureau is that every New Yorker has a right to clean and healthy air, water, and communities in which to live. The Bureau enforces, defends, and protects these important rights. Attorney General Schneiderman's Environmental Protection Bureau is active at all levels of state and federal courts, enforcing and defending the state and federal environmental laws that are in place to protect our public health, safety, and the welfare of New Yorkers, and to protect our amazing, rich, and diverse natural resources and places like our incredible Hudson River and our public lands. I'd like to give you a few examples of Attorney General Schneiderman's environmental work. First, in fighting for New Yorkers' right to breathe clean air, Attorney General Schneiderman led a broad coalition of states and cities supporting the federal EPA against out-of-state polluters and won a case in the U.S. Supreme Court this last term that reinstated the federal cross-state air pollution rule, which will reduce pollutants that blow into New York from neighboring states that contribute to soot and smog pollution, which threatens the health of millions of our residents here in New York. Second, to protect our public water supplies, at the end of last year, Attorney General Schneiderman won a multi-million-dollar judgment in a trial against the owners of a former industrial facility where chemical dumping threatened a public water supply well. Third, to protect our communities from the threats posed by climate change, Attorney General Schneiderman successfully defended New York State's participation in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in a legal challenge that was brought by outside political interests. The Greenhouse Gas Initiative is demonstrating here in New York now that reasonable action to cut greenhouse gas emissions can be taken with positive effects. First, pollutants that both injure human health and warm the planet are reduced. And second, the Greenhouse Gas Initiative has helped New York raise hundreds of millions of dollars to fund alternative energy investments and energy efficiency that both lowers energy costs now and pays economic and environmental dividends into the future. Attorney General Schneiderman is also leading a coalition of states in actions to limit greenhouse gas emissions from the electric power generation and from oil and gas development, which is rapidly growing in this country. And as we learned in Superstorm Sandy and in other major storm events, keeping electric power on and restoring it quickly when it does go out also are critically important. On that front, Attorney General Schneiderman successfully argued in a post-Sandy utility rate proceeding that the gas and electric utility must factor in sea level rise, more violent storms, and increasingly unpredictable weather in protecting its power delivery systems from severe storm damage. And then to apply that precedent statewide, Attorney General Schneiderman submitted a bill to the state legislature that would require all electric and gas utilities in the state, including Central Hudson and NYSEG, to assess their vulnerability of their infrastructure to climate change and to document for public review and comment how they intend to address these climate risks. This legislation would help ensure that Hudson Valley residents will never again suffer the types of devastating blackouts that accompanied Superstorm Sandy. Hopefully, these examples give you a sense of our work on behalf of New Yorkers' health and our environment. We welcome your thoughts and ideas for further actions in these vitally important areas. Thank you.
Now we're going to take a few questions from your comment cards. As I mentioned, we're clearly not going to be able to get to every question here. We're only going to be able to do a few tonight. But if you put your contact information on the card, someone will contact you either by email or by phone and answer your question. And we also will have regional office people that work with me at the Poughkeepsie regional office outside in the lobby after the event tonight. And they will certainly try to answer your questions as well if you have any. The first question is directed for the Attorney General. In your speech, you mentioned your office's work on fighting the foreclosure crisis. I'm interested in finding out what your office can do to address this issue of all the vacant properties in my neighborhood. I live in the city of Poughkeepsie, and this this issue is out of control?
Okay, thank you. This is that's a great question, and we really have taken a two-pronged approach to this problem. The first thing is that I already did mention is that the most effective way to deal with the problem of abandoned properties. Understand that the foreclosure crisis hurt us in many, many ways. The collapse of the housing market destroyed $7.4 trillion in home equity across the United States, had a huge impact on middle-class families, and millions of families lost their home. In New York, when I took office, 345,000 families were facing foreclosure, and I found out quickly that more than half of them had never had a chance to talk to a lawyer. That's not true anymore. We have now fund legal services and housing counseling networks so that no New Yorker will ever lose their home because they couldn't get access to a lawyer. So we're trying to keep people in their homes and stop more abandoned properties. That's the first step. The second is where there are abandoned properties, we have, and again, this is something that there were land banks in New York before we started funding them, but there was never any money for them. So a lot of communities never started them because, you know, it was one of the situations where there's legislation passed to allow communities to create them, but there was never any funding provided in the state budget. So we got money from the banks. We're giving it to communities to fund land banks, which, as I said, enable those communities to buy up abandoned properties, rehab them, or in some cases, just tear them down and make green space. But this is a critical step. Now, there's a whole category of properties I have to add that are not covered and where I need your help. Because we have to pass legislation to enable us to clean up a problem that, and I have to say that I made one very, very serious mistake earlier this evening. I'm about to identify this bill, and it's called the Zombie Kill Bill, because these are what are called zombie properties. And that reminds me that my daughter, Catherine Schneiderman, is here with us today, and she did not, in fact, name the Zombie Kill Bill, but she is an expert on zombie properties and other forms of zombie life, and I'm proud of the fact that she has just finished her freshman year in college. She's helping me out this summer, and she wanted to come up to this community forum, and she wanted to be in this beautiful part of the state with me. So she is here. And the reason we call these zombie properties is we realize that after foreclosure, they're abandoned properties, the bank owns them, you know, we can buy it from the bank. But there was a problem. People were abandoning their homes because they knew they were going to be foreclosed on. But the foreclosure process can drag on. And the banks were not maintaining the properties. They were just letting them decline because they didn't have title to them yet. But what that meant was the cities and towns, local governments had to do the upkeep. So if you have an abandoned property that no one is taking care of, frequently vandals will break in. People would break in and steal the piping and other things. They'd become locations for criminal activity, for gangs to base themselves, and they brought down the value of they bring down the value of property in every block they're on. So I've drafted legislation. It's been introduced in the state Senate and the Assembly. I know Mayor Casale was one of our strong supporters, and Senator Gipson was a co-sponsor of the legislation. This would require banks, as soon as a property that they own the mortgage on is vacant, that's to say the family got the foreclosure notice and they just get out, that the banks have to maintain the properties until the judgment is obtained. They know they're going to get it, and we're going to force them to maintain it. So the zombie property kill bill is very important because we realize that we're making progress all over the state with our land banks and buying up abandoned properties. This is an area of properties where the local government can't buy them because there's no one to buy them from. It's in a foreclosure proceeding. And if this bill is passed, which I hope it will be in the new legislative session that reconvenes, banks are going to be forced to maintain the properties. That's also going to create an incentive for banks to finish foreclosure proceedings quickly. And then we can get the properties back in the market and we can have communities buy them up. We are dedicated to getting the housing market moving in New York again and to using all of the resources we have and the resources that we get in our friendly settlements with our colleagues in the banking community to helping communities that were hurt by the crisis recover.
Our next question is actually a two-part question. I read that the Dan Scammer power plant is going back into operation. What is this going to mean for the environment and for my electric bills? And part 2 is, what is the AG's office doing to address climate change and its increasing impact on the residents of the Hudson Valley? I guess this is directed at Lem.
Okay. So when the owners of the Dan Scammer Power Plant, which is on the west side of the Hudson River just north of Newburgh, applied to the New York State Public Service Commission to repair and restart that plant after it had been closed by its prior owner and ultimately damaged by Superstorm Sandy, they left open the prospect that the plant would restart as a coal-burning plant. It's an old plant. It's about 60 years old. It's historically been coal-fired, and because its operation predated many of our air pollution laws, it has been one of New York's dirtiest power plants. So when that proposal was made before the Public Service Commission, we intervened in that proceeding and raised serious environmental concerns about the plant's possible return and restart with coal, recognizing that burning coal poses serious threats to the environment and directly contributes to climate change. The Department of Environmental Conservation ultimately agreed with us and with our others who were raising those issues here in the valley, and has now prohibited the burning of coal at that facility, which will instead primarily use natural gas with no coal even as a backup. I think that outcome really is a major victory for clean air and the environment here in the Hudson Valley. Now, on the electric bill part, so the restart of Dan Scammer as a limited operation natural gas plant should help moderate the steep increase or significant increase that many of you here in the Hudson Valley have recently felt. As of May 1st, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission imposed a new capacity zone payment in the mid-lower Hudson Valleys. The idea of that is to help foster new power plant development, and it involves the payment of a fee to each operating power plant here in the Hudson Valley, which is, of course, paid for by the electric users here in the Hudson Valley. But because there are a limited number of plants presently, that increase is quite significant. It was estimated by Central Hudson for average residential customers to be about 6%. It will be higher for some, perhaps lower for others. But bringing Dan Scammer back online as a natural gas plant should ameliorate that price increase. It's estimated by approximately 1/2, while other additional sources of generation or increased capacity to import power to the Hudson Valley are increased. With respect to climate change, I mentioned some of the work of the Bureau in defending RGGI. We're also very actively engaged at the national level because the federal government has tools under our Federal Clean Air Act that require it to address climate change. Very hard to do that on a national or global scale here from New York. We're doing our part, and we are advocating and holding the federal EPA responsible when they don't do the right thing, and when they do and are sued by polluters, which is pretty much a given, we step in and help defend those.
Thank you, Lem. This question, the next question actually, is directed for Kristen. Kristen, you spoke about a range of issues, but I didn't hear anything about education. What work, if any, is your Bureau doing to address problems in schools?
Thank you for that question. So there are 3 areas that we're focused on when it comes to education and our kids. One is addressing the language barriers that are faced by students and parents who may be limited English proficient. 2 is working to ensure compliance with the Dignity for All Students Act, which prohibits bullying and harassment on the basis of race, religion, weight, and other protected statuses. And 3, we're working to tackle the problem of the school-to-prison pipeline. This is an issue. This is a huge issue. We've got 700 school districts around our state, and we've got some districts that are suspending our kids at alarmingly high rates. And one of those districts was the Syracuse City School District, where 30% of students faced out-of-school suspensions during the 2012 to 2013 school year. And conduct that once landed you in the principal's office now results in a call to 911 or an out-of-school suspension. And we're working with the district now to bring about reform to ensure that they put in place positive behavioral interventions and work to find other ways to keep kids in our classrooms. So that's just some of the work that we're doing to address education.
Thank you, Kristen. The next question is, I would like to file a complaint against a company that took advantage of me, but I don't want to waste my time. Can you tell me how to decide when, how you decide when to investigate consumer complaints? I am going to send that one to Marty.
We really do it in all sorts of ways. When consumers call with a complaint, we check the database to see if there's a complaint. We also take cases from the newspapers. Let me give you a quick example of how a case evolves. Around Fort Drum in Watertown, New York, the soldiers were having problems with synthetic drugs. They were going to these head shops where they buy synthetic drugs at the, at the bodega or at the local store. There's a guise of legitimacy because they're sold in the open, but nobody knows what's in these synthetic drugs. So we were getting calls from Fort Drum. There were also newspaper articles describing how kids were being affected by these synthetic drugs. And then there was a story in one of the papers about a father who broke the window of one of these head shops where these synthetic drugs were sold because his son had died. And there was an apparent problem, but the solution is always not so apparent. And so what we did there is use an indirect approach, because there was no specific law to address the sale of these synthetic drugs, because nobody knew what was in the drugs. If you don't know what's in them, you can't arrest them for the illegal sale of drugs. So we use the labeling law to go after them. If they're not saying what's in the drug on the label or the package on the label, then that violates consumer laws. So it's an indirect approach to solve a serious problem. So whether you call us, whether you write us, whether you email us, or whether we, in a sense, steal it from the headlines, we try to stay alert, and that's one of the responsibilities we have to protect the consumer in the marketplace.
And let me just add, Marty is being modest. We have gone into courts all across the state of New York, and we've gotten injunctions in every court we've gone into and have cleared the shelves of this stuff in head shops all across the state, and some of these stores have had to go out of business. So this has been a really innovative approach to this that, again, is something that is now being emulated in other states. If you can't use the criminal law because, as he says, you can't outlaw something that you don't know what it is. So this was frustrating traditional law enforcement. We came up with a civil remedy to get injunctions and clear the shelves, and there are several other state AG's offices who are now doing this, but it was a great, and it came from our Watertown office, and it came from people's complaints, and that's how we get cases.
Next question. Fast food companies like McDonald's are major national corporations. Are they really violating the minimum wage laws? Terry?
So in order to answer that question, I think it's useful to understand the structure of a lot of the fast food industry, which is that the direct employers of many employees working in the industry are not necessarily the parent corporation, the franchisor, but there are franchisees who are just ordinary people with various levels of experience required, depending on the chain, who end up running any individual location. And so we have found some very serious, in the cases that I mentioned, where there were people not getting overtime, people not getting paid properly for in a variety of ways. We have found very serious violations, even though these are major national companies.
Thank you, Terry. The next question. I bought a health plan on the New York State marketplace, but it turns out that the doctors that it said were on the plan are not. What can I do? This, Lisa?
Thought I was up next. So this is actually something that we've been running into quite a bit after the, as I mentioned, fairly successful, New York marketplace and the ability for, almost 1 million people in New York State to sign up. That said, there have been issues with respect to folks signing up for particular plans with a list of doctors, finding the doctor that they want, and of course that impacting their decision on choosing that particular plan. And so what we've been doing on an individual basis, and now we're looking more systemically, is to help individual consumers who have really been faced with that problem. So they may well have paid out of pocket when they got to the doctor's office. The doctor says, hey, I'm not on that network, I'm not accepting that plan, but the consumer is there and wants to be treated. The consumer may well pay out of pocket at that moment. We're getting reimbursements for those consumers. And we're also making a case for those consumers to be able to switch plans. All that said, we have in the past had the occasion to enter into 10 settlements with various health plans to ensure accuracy on their provider directories, because we know how important this is to consumers. So we're in the midst of looking closely at that issue, and we're assisting individuals who contact us and really using the patterns that we're finding to identify particular bad actors where we may well be bringing it into a more sort of robust framework. So I encourage people to call us if they're experiencing that problem.
Thank you, Lisa. It looks like we have time for one more question. As I mentioned before, if your question was not answered, someone will be in contact with you either by phone or by email if you put that information on the question card. And I want to thank you all for coming tonight. The last question is regarding iStop, and it's actually directed at the Attorney General, and it actually comes from a pharmacist. Has your office considered coordinating with neighboring states, i.e. New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc., because people are going to those states to avoid in-system? Otherwise, iStop is a great success story from a pharmacist's viewpoint. Thanks.
Thank you. And this underlines a very important point that I didn't mention, but that is the key to the success of this program. The overwhelming majority of doctors and pharmacists in New York State are dedicated to the health of their patients, right? Once they have access to this data, almost all of them will counsel the patient and say, it's like, why you got 4 prescriptions for oxycodone? You got a problem here. The tiny number of doctors and pharmacists who are really seeking to make money by becoming sort of pill mills, now the Department of Health is getting that information. So it's through the help of the pharmacists and the doctors that this is really working. And we have done presentations about iStop. 2 other states. I've had discussions, very serious discussions with the folks in New Jersey about it. And we have, earlier this week, I was actually doing a presentation about it in Washington with the hopes that we may get a federal program in place to provide incentives for other states to adopt the program. So this is very much on our mind. The program only started up last summer, so now we have the data to show its success, and that's enabling us to make these arguments. But it certainly is our intention to go forward and see this become a national model.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the program. And as the Attorney General mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that our office is accessible to all of you, particularly my office here in Poughkeepsie. We are here to serve you and to work on behalf of New York communities across the state. If you have complaints related to any of the topics we discussed tonight, please let us know. There are going to be individuals outside in the lobby that are willing to take questions. And once again, if they cannot answer your questions, feel free to call my office or leave a comment card with your contact information. Once again, thank you for coming out tonight and enjoy the rest of your evening.